Hi, Bother Brigade. Here's what's bothering me today. It's election day here in Ontario, and I actually wanted to do this a few weeks ago, but then, the storm hit, and I couldn't do it. But unfortunately, I guess better late than never. So I'm not sure how well this is going to reach people. Probably reaching a lot of people too late, especially given the fact that advanced polls are already in the past. However, I have created a handy little playlist that I will link down below, where I've gone into a fair bit of detail over the past few months, well, really a year and a half, all about the ways in which Doug Ford is an absolutely terrible, awful premier and person. So that's for everyone's viewing pleasure. But of course, that ends around March. So here is the follow-up on election day about why this man really, truly does not deserve another term. But unfortunately, spoiler alert, it looks like he's gonna get one. So real quick, let's do a little trip down memory lane, shall we? So back in July of 2018, Doug Ford canceled the rebate program for electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles. Then in January of 2019, he has EV chargers removed from transit lots. And then in November of 2019, he spent $231 million to cancel green energy projects. And then in the month of March in 2022, he had the audacity to say, "We're investing in auto manufacturing. Electric and hybrid vehicles are the cars of the future." Says the man who has literally spent years at this point fundamentally dismantling green projects in Ontario and getting rid of them and making them harder and more difficult to come by. And now he's parading around this new, oh look, green vehicle manufacturing, we're bringing jobs to Ontario, we're getting it done. Meanwhile, he sabotaged the industry, but unfortunately a lot of people don't care about that. However, Doug Ford is merely the premier. He is also surrounded by a team of absolutely terrible people. There's Stephen Lecce, our absolutely awful, reprehensible education minister. And, that's really just scratching the surface there. But here's just another example of what's been happening in Ontario when people haven't been paying attention. In July of 2018, Lisa MacLeod becomes the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. At this time, 23,500 autistic children are on a wait list for support. In June of 2019, Todd Smith becomes the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. At this time, 24,924 autistic children are on a wait list for support. In June of 2021, Marilee Fullerton becomes the Minister of Children, Community and Social Services. At this time, 46,000 autistic children are on a wait list for support. And then in April of this year, 53,109 autistic children are on the wait list for support. Yeah, guys, this is really getting it done for Ontario and Ontarians. I'm sure those thousands of parents are really happy about you doing nothing for their children, despite pledging that you would do so. And then it's old news, but it is worth repeating. Back in 2019, the province slashed Ontario Library service funding by 50%. Because of course this man hates education and any kind of public service, right? And we're gonna come back to that. So with that lovely trip down memory lane complete, let's pick up where we left off at the end of March, early April, and Doug Ford's disastrous handling of this province and its myriad of problems and issues. So on April 6th, for instance, breaking, Ontario's fiscal watchdog finds Ontario's total program spending in 2020 was the lowest in the country. The FAO says health spending per person in Ontario was $4,800 in 2020, the lowest in Canada, and $536, or 10%, below the average of other provinces. So if you're wondering why our healthcare system here in Ontario sucks, it's in part because of this. But again, we're going to come back to this, and unfortunately it just gets worse from here. On April 8th, Andrew Nielsen tweeted, "Wake up, Ford Nation. I'm being moved out of my home because there are not enough PSWs available to work due to COVID. How would you feel if you had to be moved out of your comfortable home and into a cinder block room with none of your stuff, no TV or Wi-Fi for who knows how long?" So again, right, this is a problem where various aspects of the healthcare industry, including PSWs, personal support workers, are not able to work because they are catching COVID and they need to isolate. This was even after the whole reduction, so it was only 5 days or whatever. So still not a great scene that's happening right now. And it means that people who need help in care are being forced to move into more dangerous areas where more COVID is spreading. And unfortunately, we're going to come back to that. And then on April 10th, there was a bit of a bombshell revelation that did get some traction online that resulted in a lot of pissed off people, and you're going to see why. The Toronto Star came out with a bombshell revelation that private schools, large firms, won big in Ontario's rapid testing program, while hotspots lost out. Just 20% of rapid tests went to Ontario's COVID-19 hotspots, as the program rollout failed to prioritize vulnerable communities. And this was across the province. So predictably, the responses were full of fury, understandably so. I want to scream. So many of us did our part. Healthcare workers, vaccine ambassadors, and all of us who wore masks got our shots. Then this foul corruption. It's too much to bear. This is Ontario. Over 10 months, only 1 out of 5 of 20.7 million taxpayer-funded COVID-19 rapid tests went to hotspots. 175,000 went to private schools, more than paramedics, daycares, shelters, and jails combined. 620,000 for construction. 0 for public schools until too late to prevent a closure. And it's not like people didn't kind of suspect this based on, just where things were available or unavailable and what people were hearing around, water coolers and on online forums and stuff like that. A new Toronto Star analysis confirmed what many Ontarians already suspected. The Ford government took federally procured rapid tests and distributed the majority to private schools and large businesses, while public schools and hotspots went empty-handed. Which, to put it even more simply, folks, Ford gave our COVID tests to rich people. Our tests gave them to the wealthiest people. Free. Yeah, that just about sums it up. But he's for the little guy, right? He's supporting your average, hardworking Ontarian, no matter whether they're in Toronto or in Parry Sound or in Sudbury, whether they're, working class or upper class. He's here for you, folks. If only that were actually true. So let me get this straight. During the first 10 months of Ontario's rapid test program, private schools got more taxpayer-funded rapid tests than paramedics, daycares, shelters, and jails combined, and only 1/5 of the rapid tests went to COVID hotspots? Outrageous. And yeah, we even have a breakdown here. Private schools, where people pay for the privilege to go there, received 175,000 tests. That is more than what shelters, EMS and paramedic services, jails, and childcare facilities received combined. So if you're wondering why rapid tests were hard to come by for a while, that's because Doug Ford gave it to the children of his friends in, all their lovely actual ivory towers. Those are the people they actually care about. Not, Joe and Jane from Hamilton or Bob from Listowel, Ontario. Which again, really want to stress here, Doug Ford blocked public schools from accessing taxpayer-funded testing apparently channeled to private schools. And pay attention to the little flavor text at the bottom there. Program offering free COVID-19 tests was designed to allow businesses to safely reopen and is not meant for schools, Ministry of Health says. He's for the little guy, folks. He's for supporting all those hardworking Ontarians who just can't get a break. And that's why he's there supporting them. And that's why, you should reward him with another majority. Even though right here, the Ministry of Health is admitting that these were meant so that we could get, business back up and running. Not about students who were still vulnerable and how that would spread to their parents and thus to offices and everything else. No, it totally wasn't a piecemeal approach that was solely focused on money and profit. Never mind the actual lives of the people that these jackasses claim to represent and support. And that was all just on April 10th, folks. We still have another 2 months to get through. On April 14th, for instance, someone decided to grimly remind us that today marks the approximate 3-year anniversary when Doug Ford announced that he and his Conservative government retroactively cut public health funding months after municipalities who are responsible for 25 to 30% of funding already set their budgets. And then just a few short days later, on April 17th, they announced that they were quietly revising the plan for hitting climate change targets. I am so shocked that the Conservative government doesn't actually believe in climate change, huh? And then just 48 hours later, on April 19th, a comrade decided to again grimly remind us of the fiasco that was long-term care facilities in this province. People died of thirst in Ontario LTC and nobody went to jail. So yeah, please sit with that one, folks, and just realize that there is truly no justice in this world unless we make it for ourselves. And then, on April 20th, blaze it, let us not forget that while many suffer throughout this pandemic, Doug Ford sat on $5.5 billion instead of making necessary investments for small business, education, social assistance, healthcare, seniors, and long-term care. We deserve a government that will fight to make life more affordable. Yeah, remember that? How Doug Ford decided to actually not use $5.5 billion during an unprecedented global pandemic to help the Ontarians he claims to be supporting and cares about. I think we even touched on this in a previous video at some point, but basically at the time there was another $4 billion that they decided to not spend. It was a grant from the federal government. They instead put that towards the deficit so they could say, see, look, we lowered the deficit, even though really it was money meant for things like healthcare, PPE, testing, all things that would have actually helped us maybe weather the pandemic a little bit better so that we could get back to the oh so beloved normal that everyone's been chasing and unable to maintain or achieve because, the pandemic. And speaking of money and unaffordability and everything, now we should talk a little bit about Doug Ford supporting the people of Ontario. He's supporting all of them. He supports the little guy, the hard done by, because them liberals in their ivory towers don't know what's what. And yet here's what he had to say about ODSP. Asked whether his government would raise the Ontario Disability Support Program rate, which has been frozen at $1,169 a month since the PCs took office in 2018, Premier Doug Ford says the best way to help someone that is able to work is get them a good paying job. So, that's not how ODSP works. But in case you're wondering just how absolutely bonkers this man is and how he sounds, here's the video for proof.
Mr. Premier, ODSP. Long history going back to 95 when it was frozen, a small increase since then. We're looking at a top end at about $1,100 a month a person with a disability has to live on. Is there any plans for your government? You're spending a lot of money on hospitals and a lot of social services. Is there any plans in your government to increase ODSP payments?
Yeah, I think that's an opportunity to sit down and discuss. But the people that are unable to work for any reason, be it physically, mentally, I will always be there, Jamie, to support them. I have over the last 4 years. We're going to continue to do it. But the people that are able to work in any capacity at all, there's endless jobs in every sector. And the best way to help someone that is able to work is get them a job and a good paying job. And that's what we're going to do.
And I understand that philosophy very well, but I'm just saying a person that can't work is trying to live on $1,100 a month, and that doesn't even get them a room rent right now.
Yeah, and I fully understand that, Jamie, and we're going to be there to support those folks that can't work as we have over the number of years.
So this is not workman's comp, right? This is disability support. This is for people who, for a variety of reasons, can't work because of disability. So it's not about, we got to get them jobs. The point is that they need assistance to live. And instead, we're keeping them in forced extreme poverty, not giving them equal rights, because if you marry while on ODSP, you lose access to your benefits. And there's also the fact that the Ford government has they've taken two American companies that are seeking to privatize healthcare, and also they are going to try and rework some of these programs like ODSP to make it, you can go back to work. And it's like, that's not what ODSP is about. You're thinking of EI, where it's like, I got an injury, I got a concussion or something, so I'm off work for a bit and I paid into the system, so I get it back. All right, okay, fine. I've been tired of being bedridden. It's time to go back to work. That is where, those who want a job or can work, that's where that energy and focus should go, not ODSP, which is already extreme poverty that people can't actually afford it. And all they're trying to do is show that they have clearly no understanding of this system. They just want more disabled people to die. And this is also what made medical assistance in death is doing, where it's forcing people who are disabled to choose that because they don't actually have recourse or financial compensation to be able to afford anything or have any kind of, meaningful life or existence. And we've already seen several stories of people deciding to choose MAID because they just don't see any other way of a meaningful, dignified existence. And that should horrify everyone. But hey, so long as we're talking about money and Doug Ford, putting money in the pockets of Ontarians, we all got that lovely rebate check, right? Well, those of us who drive cars got, oh, look, for, a rebate for our stickers. Here's the catch, folks. Doug Ford is bringing in safety checks for cars every 2 years. It's going to be over $200 each time. A mechanic told my friend's husband he has to buy special computer equipment. How is your license sticker savings going, everyone? He is also opening 6 private hospitals in Ontario, which again, we talked about. See, my Doug Ford is terrible and awful playlist for that. And then towards the end of April, on April 28th, Doug Ford just announced a 1950s-era sprawl budget that is taking us backwards and setting Ontario up for an expensive, unhealthy province that will pave over our children's future. We're in a climate emergency and a cost of living crisis, but Doug Ford wants to pump a staggering $25 billion into more highways and sprawl that will make life more expensive by polluting the air, destroying farmland, and increasing the risk of flooding. Highway 413 alone will pump 17.4 megatons of climate pollution into the air by 2050. That's more than the entire city of Toronto emitted in 2018. If we really want to make life more affordable, we need to stop the sprawl now. The Ontario Greens have real solutions to make life more affordable and building livable, affordable communities and crushing climate pollution, instead of license plate sticker election gimmicks and more sprawl that will make life more expensive. Mike Schreiner is the leader of the Ontario Green Party, by the way, and he did pretty well in the debates, if I recall correctly. But the problem is, unfortunately, he's not going to win power. But everything he says there is absolutely true. What Doug Ford is proposing and doing is just so incredibly wasteful. It's not actually going to help people. It just creates more induced demand for more cars and more pollution. And it's just going to add to more sprawl, which adds to costs that the city of Toronto has to maintain because of all those other roads that they'll have to be maintaining and other communities in the GTA. So like, Durham, Peel region, stuff like that. So it's monstrously unhelpful. And then the whole, we're getting rid of the stickers, so I'm putting money back in your pockets. Meanwhile, he's actually going to fleece you more than that by forcing you and other hardworking working class Ontarians, who he's totally supporting, by the way, to get special equipment and have safety checks on your cars every 2 years. It's all a fucking sham. Oh, and speaking of shams, there was a story from the end of March that a lot of people maybe missed. 6 months after Ontario's tourism industry was promised $100 million to help it recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic, not a penny of that money has flowed to businesses. He's, really supporting the small business owners and the working class and the little guy, right? I'm clearly getting that vibe from his actions and his words, aren't you? And then literally the next day we had another revelation. Shocked to learn that the new Canada-Ontario childcare agreement will force municipalities to include more for-profit childcare operators into their system. Ontario will not restrict growth in the for-profit sector. Very disappointed with the feds. Have we not learned anything from long-term care? Nope, because Lib Tory, it's the same old story. They're just two sides of the neoliberal order coin, and that's why people should stop voting for either of those two parties and actually begin meaningfully, changing who they vote for and doing more grassroots direct action stuff. I don't know, bring back tar and feathering. Something more needs to be done because clearly voting for the same two clownish parties is not helping us at all. So now let's bring it to May. And unfortunately, there's still a good amount of shit fuckery afoot that our premier decided to do. Ford's office withheld the Premier's itinerary from the media until a Freedom of Information request for data on his first 3 months in office showed Ford had had numerous undisclosed meetings with Galen Weston Jr. of Loblaw Companies Limited over minimum wages and with retired University of Toronto psych professor Jordan Peterson over the flaky academics' criticism of Bill C-16, federal legislation protecting gender expression and identity under the Canadian Human Rights Code and the Criminal Code. Ford's minimum wage freeze decision followed his meetings with Weston, who had been on record complaining that higher labor costs in Alberta and Ontario would boost the food giant's expenses by $190 million. Aw, poor baby. In October 2018, Ford dutifully passed Bill 47, the Making Ontario Open for Business Act, which contained multiple changes to employment standards and most notably canceled the planned wage increase. July 2021, Toronto Star study shows direct correlation between conservative lobbyists' demands on Ford and his subsequent actions. Which, hey, reminds me of someone else who raised something that I've been thinking about just about every day. Who's old enough to remember 2019 when Doug Ford wanted to eliminate thousands of teaching jobs, put up to 40 kids per class, and make high schoolers learn online? But he's sensible. It's all about the little guy and, putting money back in your pocket and totally not screwing over all these systems that, we had in place for decades at this point. It's totally not that. But hey, all this talk of privatization, so, privatizing healthcare and also privatizing childcare. Let's also not forget about the gong show and nightmare scenario that is privatized long-term care with this man at the helm. Nursing home chains with some of the highest COVID-19 death rates will reap big financial rewards under Ford government's $6.4 billion expansion of the province's long-term care system, much more than nonprofit and city-run homes with lower death rates. So the places that resulted in the most dead grandmas and grandpas are the ones getting the most money, rather than the places that showed that they actually had a handle on the situation. There's your good fucking governance right there, folks. And then there's other stuff that Ford and his team haven't done, right? Like, they haven't released it a platform. They aren't attending debates. They've actively told their candidates don't go to debates. Like, how is this acceptable to people? Oh, and remember we just talked about those license checks that he gave? Because, he's putting money back in the pockets of Ontarians. Turns out a bunch of those checks bounced. How in the hell does an Ontario government check bounce and that not become a massive story and comment on the government of the day? Christ, man. The checks are bouncing for people, and you're also still going to have to pay hundreds more in vehicle safety checks. So enjoy voting for 4 more years of Ford. It's totally going to lead to a much better situation for all of us, I am sure. Which, actually I kind of skipped over it, but it bears, mentioning for the long-term care thing. So let me get this straight. For-profit LTC had 7.4 deaths per 100 beds during the pandemic, while non-profit and municipal LTC averaged 3.3 deaths per 100 beds. And still, Ontario Conservatives want to reward for-profit companies with over 50% of the province's new LTC beds. Yeah, because Doug Ford cares about the little guy and success and rewarding good job practices, right? Which I know I said we'd come back to it, so let's talk about the American companies privatizing things. PSA, newly unearthed memos show the Ford government appears to be moving ahead with plans to contract out Ontario Works, OW, and Ontario Disability Support Program, ODSP, employment services. Those being contracted out means the American companies in charge are going to do their best to manage those services in such a way that encourages people to get off them so that it saves the government money while it actively encourages suffering among those who rely on these programs. It's like those who, are put in charge of food stamps, but they really don't want anyone using food stamps. It's a incredibly malicious thing that is happening or is going to happen when Doug Ford gets reelected. Oh, and speaking of things we can look forward to with Doug Ford's re-election, important, Ontario citizens, you will no longer receive reminders in the mail that your health card, license, or plate renewals are due. Please check your renewal dates. You'll be charged if your plates or license are expired, even without stickers, and you'll get stuck for healthcare. Breaking, Premier Doug Ford was asked how COVID-related deaths of over 4,000 seniors in LTC will influence his decision-making if re-elected. Ford responded, "Most of the seniors that died would have voted for me and now they can't, so that's something I think about." Jesus fucking Christ, dude. But like I said, he's going to be rewarded with re-election because a lot of people who are actively being harmed by him and his government and their policies and their future policies are actively voting for him. Case in point, so beautifully summed up here, all the so-called freedom fighters are going to rally behind the guy who made it illegal to take your kid to the playground. The guy who went so far that even the cops were like, no, wait a minute, we're not enforcing these laws. Okay. Yeah, another thing that people seem to have forgotten over these very 4 long years of Doug Ford as Premier of Ontario. He at one point wanted to ban people from, having kids be in parks and curfews and stuff like that. That was a step too far for, most rational adults, considering it was outside. And that alone, right, that should make people think, maybe this guy isn't on my side. Maybe he's not actually supporting me. Maybe Doug Ford isn't the man he claims he is when he is privatizing services that most Ontarians actively support and enjoy. When he's actively making more financial burdens on people by adding new tests, new systems, and privatizing things so that it's only more expensive. Meanwhile, the cost of living continues to go up. He hasn't addressed housing. He hasn't done anything to really address or properly fund healthcare. Childcare is going to be more privatized. All these things are being privatized or ruined, and everything is getting more expensive, and he's downloading more costs onto you, the voter. And yet, unfortunately, he's going to win. And that's what's bothering me today.